We're going to be talking about an exhibition at SFMOMA, but I'll ask Don Dragana, what else is on display right now that you're excited about?
Okay, Don, you go.
Well, I would say there's a really interesting show from the permanent collection at SFMOMA called What Matters, and it's on the fourth floor of the museum, and it involves all kinds of media. It's put on by the architecture and design and the media arts and contemporary departments. So there's interesting film projections and architectural models as if these things were built. So there's an artist from Oakland called Walter Hood who envisions a really interesting community of buildings so that Black folks can sort of live up to their, have a great potential in their lives. But these are not built environments, but they're just models and schematics. It's really great.
Cool. So
Walter Hood is actually very well known and well regarded landscape architect. There are a number of his projects all around the city and the country. So
I wanted to ask you one other thing, Don, which is the second floor lobby at SFMOMA has changed, and the small that was there for so long has now been replaced with. Have you seen this? It's like it's
I've been photographing the process of it. So it's an artist named Barbara Solomon Solomon.
She's an architect.
Designer. Yeah, architect.
She's an architect, actually. Yeah.
And graphic designer,
Yes.
and she did a lot of work at the Sea Ranch back in the day up north. Her graphics are very bold and letter-based and shape-based. Really interesting. It looks like it could be done today, this work, but she was doing this in the 60s and 70s. And so they painted part of her emblematic shapes and forms and colors and chevrons and stripes on the second floor of the museum. So it kind of welcomes you in. It sort of gives you directions and welcomes you in. It's very bold. So they took down Loopy Doopy, which was was it a Kelly? No, it was a
Solowit.
Sorry, Solowit. Yeah, they finally painted over Loopy Doopy, which is interesting because these big murals, you can't take them off the wall, so you just have to paint over them. So that's part of the deal.
It probably took many layers, right? Took many layers of paint to cover it because they are so bold.
So we should officially get started. This is Art Viewing Adventures. I'm Rodney Paul, joined by Don Ross and Dragana Monson. But first, Nikki Trustvenia, tell us about Community Living Campaign. What's going on with CLC?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here again with Rodney and our special guests. So Community Living Campaign, we're a nonprofit, San Francisco, dedicated to the needs and advocacy of seniors and disabled individuals here in San Francisco, especially when it comes to the digital divide. We offer a lot of tech support, training, online training, phone training, in-person training for seniors and disabled people who want to get in touch with tech and not make it such a, obscure part of our life. So that's our main focus. And then we do online programming like this, and we have writing programs, we have exercise in person, just a lot of stuff. I'll put our webpage and our event page on the chat, and just really happy to be here with you all. Thank you.
And I think of Art Viewing Adventures as kind of exercise for the mind, right? We're having fun kind of considering these ideas. So today we're here to talk about a pretty exciting exhibition at SFMOMA that's been up all summer and is still there for the next 2 weeks. Frank Bowling, and we'll be telling you about him. But first, I want to welcome Dragana, Monson, and Don Ross back to Art Viewing Adventures.
Hi, everybody.
Fellow art museum guides, and I know you both really love this exhibition. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up my slides. And this is an image that we'll be talking about at the end of today's program, but it's actually the one piece by Frank Bowling that is often up at SFMOMA. And this is Frank Bowling. And he is now 89 years old, still very productive. I think he's a real role model for aging and staying really active and productive, which I know is important to Community Living Campaign. I mean, if we can all follow in this guy's footsteps.
Yes.
And then this map shows his odyssey. He was born in Guyana in a place called Bartaborn. And he grew up there, but then as a pretty young man, moved to London and went to art school in London and was part of the scene there. But by the early 1960s, he decided he really needed to leave and go to New York City because he felt that would really expand him as an artist. And this show really focuses on his New York years, but it does actually show some of the stuff he's done more recently too.
Yep.
Dragana, Don, would you add anything to that?
I was just going to add, that he was born in British Guyana at that time, right? So his move to London was relatively easy because it was still, I guess, a former British colony. And what I found very interesting is that he moved to London to be a writer and poet, and that visual artist was furthest from his mind. And he felt that, and he was told that he has a story to tell, and he felt that the best way to tell that story was through writing or poetry, and that only after he was exposed to London treasures at the National Gallery and Royal College of Arts that he became intrigued and enrolled at the college to study actual visual arts.
Yeah, and Don, would you add to that? Is there anything else that strikes you about his biography?
Yeah, his odyssey from London to New York is interesting too, in the sense that I think he left family members behind. It was such an important move for him that he felt like that New York City was the hotbed of art creation and he needed to be there. And there is a video in the exhibition that shows that he still has a studio in New York. He still feels it's important to have representation in New York, even though he's back in London now, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess he did. He went from London to New York, but then he kind of went back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said, Dragana, about him thinking about being a writer, what struck me about that and about his art is that we get a narrative, even though there's a lot of elements of abstract in it. It's still like often there's these recurring images. It is partially representational, and it does suggest stories.
Absolutely.
And so this is one of the first things you see when you go into the gallery is this is called Mother's House in Night Storm. And something we see in the map, we see this little photograph here, but a close-up of that is this thing, Bowling's Variety Store. This was a business that his mother ran, included a fancy apartment, I guess. And just really interesting the way he takes this photographic image and uses it on multiple canvases. So we'll start with you, Dragana. What do you make of that?
Well, I go back to what he said, that he wanted to tell the story, that he had a story to tell, and the image of his mother's house and impact of his mother on his development is obviously was something very important to him. I read somewhere, I think in the interview, that he actually came to New York with about a dozen of rolled up canvases that already had a silkscreen imprint of his mother's house. So what you see here, obviously it was produced in New York in 66, but the canvas came from London with that image of the house that then he continued to work on, and kind of ready-made object. He said somewhere how important for him were these ready-made images, one being the house, the others images of his mainly his children and his mother. So he's using them as a starting point here, and then developing into the painting. And the other thing that strikes me on all of these is his use of color. I think the color is striking. It's really important to him, the way how he applies the color, the way how he experiments with color. He's using acrylic, but he's also tinning acrylic. So you can see how some layers are very, very thin and almost transparent. Anybody, maybe Don can add to this.
Let's look at another one of these images. And Don, like, what do you like? Where does it take you when you see this use of this photographic image, especially since you're a photographer? What do you think of this?
Well, I think of sort of the mystery involved in I think he's about starting at maybe having a starting place with his mother's house because it's part of his biography, but he often obscures it with those thin washes of paint. So it's not it's not hitting you over the head with just a graphic of a house, but he's obscuring lots of his imagery. And I find that makes it very mysterious.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is paint. These are paintings that really reward deep looking, and you will miss things if you don't spend a lot of time with each of these canvases. I want to invite folks in the audience. If you want to chime in with your thoughts, you can either throw them in the chat or we're not a gigantic group, so if you want to unmute and say something about your thoughts on this, that's very welcome.
Meanwhile, I'll point out, actually, I don't know how easily I've seen this in person, so I probably that helps me. I'm not sure if you see this for the first time on a screen, but in this particular instance, you have actually 3 images of the house, right? One next to each other, and each is obscured in different ways. So it's it creates this mystery and what's exactly happening. Almost to me, sometimes I think, is it fire? Is the house engulfed in the flames, or what?
Yeah.
What makes it so mysterious?
I would say also that sorry.
Go ahead, Don.
This use of the silk screen as a tool was very big in the 60s. If you think of pop art as well, and like Andy Warhol, who used silk screen images and using them in multiplicity. So like doing one screen and then another screen on top of another screen or next to another screen. So this idea of art in the time of mechanical reproduction is it's very hot during that time in the 60s to use silkscreen.
Yes.
Yeah, I like Joan's comment. The house is where the journey began. It's the starting point for all that followed. And we see that in his work where nothing is ever rejected. So he's really like, these are images that stay with him, even though he's left this place. It would just be it would be someone who's working in parallel, but I do think of Gerhard Richter, and he has lots of images from East Germany that he had left behind. He did these kind of blurred photorealist paintings, so he's not using the same technique, but maybe the same idea that this is something that's really kind of going to stay part of Frank Bowling, even though he's moved on from Guyana. Other thoughts before we move on?
Rodney, excuse me, I really like that detail about that house.
Yeah. I mean, it is really kind of breathtaking. Let's go back to so that's the actual house, and yeah, just kind of, we see this, and when you first go into the gallery, you don't really know what it means, but they do have this photograph up. And, it's just interesting that he starts by doing that, but we'll see later on, even at the end of his, well, not the end of his career, but at this current point in his career, he's still using photographs in his abstract. Sometimes they're very hard to find. Sometimes you don't even know they're there.
Yep.
And so this is something else that he starts doing pretty early on. This is Bardica born, because that's evoking the place where he was born. But he's got these profiles of continents in his painting. And we can think about, like, what's he trying to tell us? This is Africa, but often we see South America in them.
Yeah.
Karen is asking, I wonder if this other painting shows when he lost his mother. Do we know how long his mother lived? Did she end up going with him to England?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I think he returned and visited Guyana again while in New York in '68. I remember reading that. Didn't mention his mother, but
it's interesting because she's in some of these images, especially that
yeah.
She's in this.
She's right there, right in front of the house. In that
she's there,
right
and
there.
then this one, yeah, very prominent.
Are those just curious? Are those particular colors indicative of the flag or anything? Because they feel like flag-like colors to me.
Yeah.
Or country colors or something.
Can someone Google a Guyana?
I don't know.
Of course, it's British Guyana.
At the time, British Guyana, but now it is just Guyana.
You got to figure the colors mean something. And then I found it was really interesting, like this gray down here. This is a very deliberate choice he's made to leave like this area of gray at the bottom. Sarah says red, yellow, and red are the current flag colors. And we do see
not really.
Red, yellow. We see a lot of green.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't help but think that the colors are kind of reflection on the environment, on landscape of Guyana, the lusciousness probably of the tropical vegetation, the oranges and greens are found there for sure, and then blue of the sea. So I would think, that's direct reflection of the environment that he grew up in.
And we were just looking at this image that has the continent in it, and this is something he says about using those shapes. He says, I eventually found the most comfortable way of actually dealing with paint and structures from the outside by leaning on ready-made shapes in photographs. So, and this is something, ready-made is something that we associate with Marcel Duchamp, and this idea that things out there in the world can be appropriated for art. But he's doing it in his own way. And so this one, Mel Decides, this is 1968, and this one has multiple images of the continent of South America. And it also has his name kind of very subtly shown in the midst of the painting. I was reading that sometimes he would get like objects or knickknacks from his studio, sometimes even like keys, and put that in the paint. So the paint, we of course can only show you 2 dimensions here, but the paint, there's like a lot going on with these images.
At this point might be good actually to point out how did he create these images, these ready-made images. He used stencils. I was watching a video of him basically cutting out the outline of South America on a kind of flimsy paper, adhering it to a canvas, and then using a spray paint to go over it to get that outline as precise as it is. So he's using not only silk screen images like in those photographs that we saw, but he is also using the stencil as way of getting the image that he is after.
Yeah, I'd also say too, like if you notice the borders on the upper left and the top, that's kind of emblematic for him too. It sort of helps contain maybe the chaos that's going on the image plane by putting it on the, in my opinion, sort of containing it. And he's using paint as or tape as stencils as well, you know, so like he might cover certain areas and then peel it up later. But I like how, I think to this day, his borders are often pops of color like that.
Absolutely. These edges are so important because if you squint or you close your eyes and eliminate, let's say, that orange and blue right there, it would be totally different painting. I think it's a really essential element of the composition in this painting.
Yeah, we'll see that when we get to the end and we'll talk about this painting that SFMOMA has in its collection. There's all kinds of interesting borders and things going on. And I think, wouldn't we agree, like he's very novel in his techniques and in his materials. He's just kind of, you know, doing things, he's really making this his own form of creation, I think.
And he said that he was after that experimentation was essential element of his practice, that he was looking on finding the new ways, and the tinning of paint, for example, was one way, adhering all these elements another way. But in the same breath, he is acknowledging his debt to, you know, artists who came before him, or to his discussions in New York with all the artists that he encountered there. Among them, let's say, Jasper Jones was definitely great influence. And if you remember Jasper Jones' maps, you can kind of see where the dialogue and stencils, and yes, indeed. And Bowling is certainly talking about it. He's not trying to hide that.
So move on. So here's just a sense of like how the paintings are in the gallery. We're going to get to some of these really colorful ones that I know, Don, you particularly grabbed onto. Let's talk about like this one, Tabernic Temples. And Don, what grabs you about this painting?
Well, I think mostly it's the use of those vibrant and sometimes electric colors that you wouldn't think necessarily, or I wouldn't necessarily think that these colors were in big use in 1975 necessarily, but he's getting a hold of some interesting colors. In this, he sort of has this monolithic sort of structure in the center of the canvas, and then again he's using tape and other ways of covering up the surface so it doesn't get all covered with the paint. So I don't know, I just really I love these colors, the vibrancy of these colors, and these thin washes like Dragana was saying, and a multitude of drips. So he when he did this series of paintings, he kind of had a contraption on the studio floor, and he worked vertically flat on the studio floor instead of like having it up on the wall and painting. He might take his canvas flat and then would tilt the canvas when he's pouring the paint so the paint would pour naturally. But he wanted, it's like a mix of chaos and control, really. So he left a little bit to chance. But then he's also, if you notice, there might be a different picture where you see a close-up of this one. There's actually some tape on the bottom, maybe one more.
Well, I don't know if yeah, okay, there we go.
There's actually
there it is.
Some masking tape that was left over, but you can tell that through the process that he used masking tape, or this utility tape, the silver gray utility sticky tape, to keep some areas from being covered in paint. But I think he left that one intentionally to show the process.
Absolutely.
So Dragana, what's your
amazing? Yeah.
what's your reaction to this,
Yeah,
Dragana?
similar to Don, you know, you react to the colors, to vibrancy of colors. You also notice that he often kind of puts complementary colors together. So he is precise in a way how he, you know, joins this colors and in what order and what. But in the same, and I read also somewhere that yes, he was trying to control and in the same time allow chance to take over. So he's balancing between those two ways of
Oh,
in
so
order to get this.
Robert's asking, what does tabernic mean? Makes me think of tabernacle, but I'm not sure. You know, what do you guys have a sense of that?
Nope.
We might not know the answer. You know, one of the questions that I always like asking as a tour guide for art is like, how is this made? And you know, Don, like you were talking about the masking tape, but I gotta say, I'm still very intrigued. Like, how do you control the paint and get these like up and down lines that follow one another? Do you guys have any sense of how one, you know, if I was trying to imitate him, how I could do that?
Yeah, I think what you would do is you would, again, maybe have the canvas on the floor, and if you tilt it at certain angles,
Yes.
so it's a lot of like pouring and tilting and changing the direction.
Yeah.
I think gives you that up and down.
And tinning paint that also allows paint to maybe moves faster, and so that's all part of, especially on the edges. Look at the edges; that it's obvious that it's more transparent, thinner paint used in those areas.
Do you think there was probably a lot of trial and error like this? Like we have this amazing image, but to learn this technique, he must have had to go through many canvases.
I think so.
Probably. Yeah.
Because there's only so much you can control, and so he was kind of letting go to sort of the chaos that emerges when you it's just he's letting a little bit go to chance.
Yeah, and Roger says maybe he was predicting today's chaos. Well, we'll see some. We'll see an image at the end that really I think does maybe speak to things that are going on today. Here's another one, kind of using similar technique, I would say. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the same technique, and just looking at the choice of color. I mean, talk about understanding the title. I'm not sure that I know what this means. Iseni. But to me, it almost looks like a block of ice melting. I don't know if it has anything to do with that or not.
Could it be some kind of frozen dessert?
Or frozen dessert? I can
You know,
see
I'm sorry.
that.
Maybe it's because it's August and you know we're all like looking forward to that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then here's another one, Sun Crush. This one's a little different, I guess. It's still got a lot of similar elements to the other ones, but that's a little more subtle, I guess. What do you guys think?
Yes, it is. And again, look how he's attaching colors to each other, the orange and blue, and you know, greens and reds. So he's definitely has a system here. And then this little white right there on the left side, it just sparks, gives the kind of painting very dynamic form to me. But it's serene, right? What do you think? A feeling for me, it's serene.
Yeah, it's a little like Paco mentions thinner. There's like something thinning. You know, it's not as dramatic as some of these other ones.
Yeah.
But I would have to say I really love this one. I like them all, but I think maybe we should talk about like if you could only have one of these, which one would you take? Here's another one. Do you already have a sense, Don? Which one do you want? I mean, I know we're not really supposed to take these things from the museum. We'll get in trouble if we do. But
I like Tabernic Tumbles from 1975, the yellowy one.
All right, you're taking Tabernic
This
Tumble.
is a close second for me, though.
Although, if Dragana wants to arm wrestle you for Tabernic Tumbles, I would go along with that. Here's yet another one. Do you have one, Dragana, that you would say that's the one I want?
That icicle.
Want the
Iceni. I like that one, even though if you're giving me the choice of everything I've seen so far, I would probably actually go for those early 66, 67 images that have a story in the embedded in them. So
well, you make a good point, Dragana, that I mean, really, I don't get a narrative from these. These are more just pure abstract, right?
Color placement, form, all those elements, structure of the painting, composition, all of it is here. Narrative, I am not sure that I would find any.
You know, the artist that I had to think about when I was looking at these things, maybe just because there's this verticality to it, was Wayne Thiebaud. Some of Wayne Thiebaud's.
You know what it always made me think of was Half Dome by Ansel Adams, this sort of monolithic structure.
Yeah.
But remember some of those Thiebaud's cut mountains? Now that's where you are going. Now I see why you brought that up. Yeah. Because I didn't see it, but now.
So in a sense, there could be some sort of narrative with those really familiar type of physical structures in a way.
Maybe.
Somebody can find narrative in that.
Well, look at this title. It says The Weaver at Home.
Right.
Well.
So let's move on and look at some other stuff from the exhibition. Don, you kind of gave us some pictures of some of the things that are in the cases there. What do you think is notable about like this one being on display at the museum?
Well, 1968, big year. Black Panthers, assassinations, all the politics, world culture, all these things coming to the fore. I think I don't know, like particularly if he had anything to do with the publishing of this pamphlet, but I think it was in his collection of materials. So I think it had an influence on how he was thinking about things. As a Black man, I think especially important to be connected to all those issues.
It's like politics are important to him, although they're not as prominent. One of the things he said, one of the reasons he left London was he was kind of being pigeonholed and being told, oh, everything has to be about anti-colonialism.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to be free to do whatever he wanted.
Was it the art critic Greenberg who had a conversation with him?
Yes, Clement Greenberg was apparently his friend, and he told him that in New York he has an option not to do whatever is expected of him to do,
so
but do what he wants.
Yeah, it didn't have to be overtly political just because he was a Black man. He could actually venture into abstraction, and I think that Frank Bowling kind of credited him in that conversation with setting him free in a way to just paint.
Even though, of course, in New York he was part of that group of Black artists, Jack Whitten being one of his best friends, and a number of the others. And I think exhibits show some of the photographs from the openings in New York where he's part of that group and he works with them and exchange ideas. So he's part of that zeitgeist in New York of the time.
We have a good comment from Joan. She says Bowling was an art reviewer in the 1960s, which was very unusual. In that position, he put together a controversial art exhibit that included Edwards and others. So he's kind of got his feet in different places, I guess.
Well, that literary past with being a writer or a poet, putting words together, but then also just being a painter for the sheer joy of painting,
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have this image, Don, you provided from an exhibition of his work in one of the New York museums. It just shows you the scale, right? Anything else you want to add to this, Don?
Not really. Just showing the scale of those big early works.
I'm
It's so
curious, does anybody know which museum is this?
No, I
Whitney.
didn't happen to get the
It's the
title.
Old Whitney Museum,
Which
It's the
one?
old
Oh,
Whitney. Okay.
Newtown.
was that his
Thank-
first solo show or something? Yeah, something about that.
Oh,
And it's
Old
just it's
Whitney.
interesting because like
Oh.
this is not how a museum would look today. You
No.
know, you would never have the black floors. It's kind of it's just a real dated picture, I think. You know,
Yeah.
really, you got to figure this is the 60s or the 70s. So that's the old Whitney. And like the new Whitney, Don, you wanted to show this. This is some of the paint that he was using, and it wasn't a typical type of paint for you know, fine artist.
Right.
Right.
This is like a luminescent sort of red. The title of the paint is like Wildfire series or brand. Just being really experimental with colors, just choosing all these different kind of luminescent, iridescent, electric colors.
Yeah, I think if you were to touch this paint container, it would burn you, right? It's so amazingly red.
And look at the
it-
label, just for a minute. Look at
Yeah.
the label. Doesn't the even label in a way remind you of some of the electric colors that he and imagery that he uses in some of those paintings? But again, I think you can even see that he's tinning the paint. You can kind of see on the edges of the bucket how he is mixing
Oh yeah.
paint inside, right?
Paco's saying this color is reminding him of the Canadian wildfires. And I think we'll see a painting a little later on that kind of does evoke some of that going on in the world. Here's an example of him working. And you can see like the canvases are often very horizontal. He's not doing them on an easel. In fact, here's a picture of him with a canvas on the floor. And Don, you were saying that he would have some kind of contraption for tilting the canvases.
This would be a moment where he's probably laying out the canvas, getting ready to do a pour. So you could grab, conceivably, you know, he had some sort of table contraption that would help move the big canvases, but you could just see that you could just tip it from any corner, really, if you wanted to make those interesting drips with very thin washes, like Dragana was saying.
You know, this one, looking at this canvas, I think, are we seeing some of those continental shapes here?
Yeah.
And this is like a preliminary, like he's already got some of these ready-made images.
Yeah,
But he
stenciled.
doesn't.
They're already stenciled on. That's kind of starting point. In that video I watched, he does that. He places the stencil on just primed canvas and starts from that and sprays around it, pulls off the stencil, and then continues working.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. So the exhibition is interesting because it has a whole section of the work of other artists that he was friends with or influenced by. And it's kind of like, you know, they're different. Like there's even some sculpture in there. And then there's things that are like, this is the Sam Gilliam, we'll get to that in a second, but something that's almost a cross between a painting and a sculpture. But you were saying, Dragana, that Jack Whitten was a fellow Black artist in the 1960s.
And close friend who they shared lots of discussions about art. And this, I must admit, I never seen this piece until now, and it's very intriguing, especially when you look at it title, John Lennon Altarpiece. Since it's made in '68, the only thing you can think of, okay, this must be inspired by the music of John Lennon. So now, what in the music has inspired this? What's
Maybe
behind?
Glass Onion or something? I don't know. That's a great question for any Beatles fan. Is like, what does this piece tell us about about John Lennon? It's very, very kind of engaging. Like, I could not look away from it. I was totally drawn to this thing. And you walk around it, so it's kind of like a human figure or torso in legs, but then all these like nails and in these like rusting metal pieces. Don, what did you make of this?
Well, I actually photographed this piece, so I got to really study it. I found it a little macabre in a way, a little disturbing with, I don't know, there's some implication with the rusty nails, the nails going into the wood.
Skin.
You'd have to hammer them in, you know. I mean, it's like a kind of a physical act to get them to stick into the wood. I don't know. It's kind of a dark piece for me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it made me think of like the martyrdom, and I thought of the murder of John Lennon, and yet this is something that's done 12 years before the murder of John.
Joe just made a comment about Jack Whitten.
Yeah, let me read that. Whitten often worked with nails and metal in many, many pieces besides the Lennon one, relates to enslaved peoples. Oh, that's so interesting.
Huh. But then,
and then it's an altarpiece. So I don't know. Does that suggest martyrdom?
well,
In
that's what I would deduce. That yes, that it suggests martyrdom. Was John Lennon at this particular period of time being attacked, being vilified? Is this the time?
Well, you know, he famously said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, which some people were really upset. That would have been, I think, a couple years before this.
But then, since that quote, he was really vilified and attacked by religious press. So
I don't think J. Edgar Hoover was a big John Lennon fan. I think he must have had a pretty big FBI file. That part of it. Yeah, and of course, and then John Lennon becomes an important part of the New York scene. Joan says you could also relate it to the African habit of making a contract by nailing into wood.
Wow.
Or could it be Norwegian wood? I don't know. I think this is just a very intriguing piece. I will. Sometimes we do not have the answer to the questions we ask on this program, and this would be a good example. This one's just, I think you could spend a lot more time thinking about this. Other thoughts? Anybody else in the audience want to chime in? Maybe we need Richie Unterberger for this, our rock music historian, who I believe is doing a program tonight for Community Living Campaign. I'll ask him. I will ask Richie if he's seen this and if he has any insights into this. I'll report back on the next art viewing adventures. We should probably keep going. This is that Sam Gillian piece we were talking about called Street. Any thoughts? I mean, the colors, I think that's certainly something they have in parallel, these really bright, vibrant colors.
And also the tin color kind of dripping down, watery almost reflection of water even here, and also in Frank Bowling work. You get that translucence of a color, luminosity of the color applies, I think, to both of them.
So there's some technique they have in common, although Gilliam's kind of doing his own thing with this textile that kind of suggests a canvas but is not really a canvas, is almost a sculpture. Whereas Bowling is going to really stick to doing things on canvas. What do you think, Don? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I actually love seeing this piece. To me, it just seems like it could be made today. It's just so contemporary. Just love those vibrant colors. I like this idea of taking a painting and turning it into sculpture. It's so simple by way of just hanging this work, this canvas or the sheet. I don't know. It pops off the wall when you see it. It's really a beautiful piece.
Deletes the frame, right? Deletes the frame. No frame anymore.
Right.
And I think it's to the museum's credit that they had so many of these pieces that were in conversation with the Frank Bowling pieces. It reminds me of what the DeYoung Museum did with the Ansel Adams exhibition.
Right.
You know, that was a big part of that. Joan's comment on this piece: I love this piece in this artist. He not only pours the paint, but takes the canvas out of the frame. And Sam Gilliam's also an artist that we lost recently. So I think he died within the last year, and hopefully there will be some really great retrospectives of his career in museums soon, because he's really one of the great ones. And then Francis Bacon. And I know, Dragana, you were intrigued by the connection between Bacon.
I was intrigued, even though I actually did read that Frank Bowling said that when he started painting, he looked obviously to some of the English greats like Gainsborough and Turner, but that among contemporary artists, Frank Auerbach and in particular Francis Bacon were a great influence to him, and that he wanted to emulate way how Francis Bacon used the paint and worked paint over on a canvas. So when you look, but that's, you know, this is me reading. Now, when I look at this without knowing that, when I look at Bacon and try to find what inspired Bowling looking at this piece, it's a little harder to make that connection. I don't know what you guys see.
You're not going to confuse one for the other, I don't think.
No, that's for sure. Yeah.
If you told me, this was a Frank Bowling piece, I would have been like, what happened?
Yes, no.
Well, there is abstraction in that representation, right? I mean, it's sort of like that face is not your normal face, so to speak.
True. Colors, but again, much more subdued colors.
Much darker.
Yeah, darker for sure.
Yeah, like Bacon there's always this foreboding in the work of Francis Bacon, which Frank Bowling, I don't think it is foreboding. I think it's kind of uplifting, you know.
Joyous, often.
Joyous.
Mm-hmm.
Often.
So let's go back. Here's him kind of in conversation with another artist. Who's Afraid of Barney Newman, evoking the Barnett Newman kind of Stations of the Cross and his body of work. And he's, they're both in New York City at the same time. I just think it's really like, Who's Afraid of Barney Newman? What an intriguing title. He's like, I'm not.
No, he's not. And look again here how he is putting together green and red complementary colors together. You can see that he's doing it very deliberately. And again, you have stencil. Again, composition is very measured. He's superimposing this organic shape of the South America on this very rectangular piece over it. It's beautiful composition.
Yeah, I really like this one. And then I guess this is yellow line. Is that what's really evoking Barnett Newman? It's just interesting that he's.
Yeah, because if you remember the Station of the Cross, right? There was those just thin line separating elements. But I don't know. Yeah.
Fun piece. So here's some more views of the gallery. We'll be talking about this piece in a second. And then this is just giving you a sense of how it was set up. I'm really intrigued by this photograph of him in his gallery, moving his canvas. And he's a young man here. So it's like clearly New York these are like his glory years.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on that, John? Like, you got to see them set all this up.
Oh, well, I think the graphic element of the red and the yellow stripes kind of repeat what he's doing. Oh, on the wall, actually, sort of like the edges of the canvas. Sometimes he'll put those structures in on the edges to sort of contain everything. Yeah. I liked how that all came full circle.
Do you, as someone who works for the museum, Don, do you ever think, oh, there's so much that we do that just kind of gets overlooked, that people don't?
That might be a subtle one, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Huh. But those are within his palette for sure, those colors. Yeah.
The Frank Bowling colors.
Yep.
So that's always fun to like get that sense of here's why the museum did what it did. So here is another one of these pieces. I didn't get a title on this one. Sorry about that. But we can kind of see like these stenciled images, things that maybe suggest body, land masses.
Land masses, continents. Yeah. Yep.
And then here's some more of what we're seeing in the gallery. So you can see a lot of these are very large.
And these are more recent ones, right?
This is the more recent stuff. Yes. And then we're going to talk about this one right here. So 1973. So that's at the end of this New York period. Dragana, what struck you about this piece?
Well, I just looking at the title, The Terminal Illness, and which immediately kind of pushes you back and is, and there is something heavy here. Is this blue element in the middle? Is that what something that? But on the other hand, that is put over this vibrant orange again, blue and orange again. He's playing with his complementary colors, and to be honest, this very much kind of reminds me or invokes the Rothko piece we have at the museum. That one, orange and blue. I guess I'm not the only one who is reminded, because it does have that blue and orange working together. But in Rothko's case, it's, you talk about being enveloped by emotion. Maybe that's the same thing we can say for bowling if you go back to this.
I think one interesting difference is that bowling, like we talked about earlier, his works really often evoke a narrative. And I to me, like Rothko, it is, people love Rothko. It is very enveloping and triggers strong emotions, but I don't get a narrative from this.
No.
You know what's funny? I have a funny story about this, because I think when I was starting my touring at SFMOMA, there was a class of young kids in the gallery, and I think the teacher asked the little boy, like, what's going on in this picture? What do you see? And he says, well, it's a bathtub on fire, of course. Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah. That's I love the certainty of that. And
I do too.
So maybe there is narrative after all. So this is one, I think, Paco, you were talking earlier about thinking about wildfires in conjunction with that paint that we showed. This is something that he did very recently, 2022, called Robert's Australia. And, it does make me think about, all the fire in Australia. I mean, why else would you choose this color to represent a continent? Do you guys agree, or do you have other thoughts on this?
No, I agree. And actually putting map of Australia over the globe, it's almost, to me, says it's not just fires in Australia, whole world is on fire, which it is, right? We know right now it is. And so it could be comment on what we experienced right now. I'm actually intrigued by this dark red or brown, hard to tell, shape in there.
That one there?
Yes. Does that have to do with Robert, or is the area where Robert is from, or no, not sure, but there is again, it feels like that there is a story there.
I see some comments out here. That reminds me about a mantle. Tell us, what do you mean by that, Paco? A mantle. Oh, maybe that's what that shape is. There's a lot of interesting things going on in this painting, you know, like there are these two little threads here in the painting, which, you know, I wonder what the story is with those, you know.
I think a lot of it's like that little shape might, well, who knows, but I feel like it's an artifact of the process and his masking and his obscuring and then revealing. The string could be part of that too. You know, where you might use it for a stencil and then peel it away, you know. I sort of feel like it's part of the process. Yeah.
He does, you know, he does bring chance into his art. That we've already talked about that. And I think that's, you know, and so again, like Gerhard Richter's kind of scraping paintings, you know, like he's like, yeah, that just happened when I was doing this, but that is part of the art. But it's a very, very engaging image. And then this is the piece, we started with this, but this is the piece that is part of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art collection. It's called Elder Son Benjamin. And we know what this refers to because his son is named, S-O-N son is named Benjamin. And we got to have Benjamin Bowling speaking at the museum when this exhibition opened up. I think both of you were at that talk, right?
Indeed. Yes, we
were. And that was really, really interesting. And I have to say that I did not realize that this is a close-up, and we'll go back to it. So this here, these two little things that I think look like eyes on maybe some sort of mouse or something. This is a photograph of that son, Benjamin Bowling, who spoke really beautifully about his father's work, even though he himself is not an artist. He just wanted people to hear like what he, as a family member who spent his whole life looking at this art, what his reactions are. But what do you know, by the way, this is huge. You can see, like, you know, it's 203 inches wide. It had been on the second floor in the permanent collection before this exhibition, and maybe it'll go back there. Just like a really, really powerful piece. But what do you guys think? Let's start with you, Don. What are your thoughts on this painting?
Well, for me, this harks back to Jasper Johns in a way, sort of that flag shape and those colors. But I do like the material that's used like in that top line in the by the blue and the yellow between the two, sort of this fabric material that he's using. And I think, how did the story go? Something about his son, Benjamin, said he never put him in any paintings, and then finally Frank Bowling decided to put him into a painting. But he did it in such a subtle way. But the sun, I think, refers to like the brightness of the yellow, or you know, of the sun, but then also his son Benjamin. So it's a double play.
Maybe his son is his son, right?
Yeah.
His sunshine.
Yeah.
So you can play.
Well, he certainly spoke very eloquently on his behalf, being sort of the, you know, working with his estate. His whole family, I think, helps run his estate now.
And I like to point out again, when we talked about edges, notice that little piece of green on the left side and the red stripe on the right, and green at the bottom. He's again framing it, and then he's applying, as we discussed, some elements like that fabric there. It's a really striking painting, and it's very deliberate. Again, in that interview, I remember reading that he said, as much as he allows chance, you know, chance is definitely element of it. He doesn't plan things in advance. He doesn't sketch and create base to start the painting with. Actually, I have a quote here, something about that there is no formula and no blueprint for his painting. So he comes in and lets paint guide him. Let's the forms and colors guide him to bring the final.
Yeah, I love that. And those strong, I think we have such a reaction to this piece too, because it's on such a great grand scale, but it's those primary colors, right?
Yeah.
The red, the yellow, and the blue. Like, isn't this like particularly kind of suited for our eyes?
Yes.
These colors. Yeah.
And I think one of the great things about this exhibition is it helps us understand this piece that is part of the permanent collection. You know, I think that's always great when there's an exhibition that comes in. We get to see a broad range of the artist's work, but what we're really going to be left with is a newfound appreciation for the work that we're going to continue to be able to engage with.
Yeah, this is a real anchor for this show. I mean, it probably was the first piece that sparked this whole show for him,
That's right.
right?
Inspired it, right?
Yeah.
Curators probably said, "Wow, look at this. Let's do something about it."
Yeah.
And took them 5 years, but
Yeah.
that's how
Maybe
long
longer.
it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, any last thoughts on this exhibition? It is on display through September 10th, so you're kind of running out of time to see it if you want to go. But you know, it's still up. It's on the 7th floor. What are your thoughts, Dragana? What should
I just can say, please do go to see it because it is striking. It is artists that we all should know about. And I think that the exhibit also provides the context of where he's coming from, what the milieu of New York of the time, mid 60s, all the people he worked with, all of that kind of brings our appreciation for that period
Yeah, I see
forward.
Don's put a phone number in the chat. So if you need to get a ticket, he can help you get a ticket. Thank you, Don. That's very kind of you. Any last thoughts from you, Don?
No, I mean, I would say if you want to be inspired and slightly overwhelmed by all this beauty, I would definitely catch it on the 7th floor. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for tuning in for Art Viewing Adventures. Nikki is telling me that for some reason my upcoming shows are not on the calendar, but we do have shows planned for the 2nd and 4th Mondays of both September and October. So we got some good stuff coming up for you guys. And if you guys have if you're getting my Friday emails, there'll be more information there. And if you're not, put your email address in the chat. I'd be happy to add you to it. Seeing some nice comments out there. Glad you guys have enjoyed this discussion. I really enjoyed it. I want to thank Dragana and Don. Thank you very much for being part of this. It's always great talking to you guys about this stuff.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you, Rodney. That was fun.